that's not, if you look at when this occurred, I mean, let me see. Hey, somebody's got their mic on, probably Ali. Not Ali, maybe Parker. I don't know, somebody's got one on. All right, so if you look in your reading, it says, in the Revolutionary era, the capitals moved westward. Now, perhaps they moved westward for defensive reasons, right? But then it says this: these geographical shifts portended political shifts that deeply discomfited many more conservative Americans. What does that mean? Who's they? But what change did they not like? All right, if you're on page 161, the democratic character of the new state legislatures was vividly reflected by the presence of many members from the recently enfranchised. What does enfranchise mean? All right, this is the kind of issue we have to deal with in the textbook. Eligible to vote. That's right, recently given the right to vote. Poorer Western districts. So if you think about Bacon's people, Bacon's Rebellion people, if you think about, remember it was West versus East a lot. Well, now who can vote? Western people, all right? And so one of the things that seems reasonable, and if you keep reading, their influence was powerfully felt in their several successful movements to relocate capitals from haughty seaports to the less pretentious interior. What you're looking at, folks, is the influence of the Western commoner type people who are not the urban Eastern Seaboard people. Say, hey, wait a minute, why is the capital down by the ocean? We got to travel. Keep in mind, if you were going to Colonial Williamsburg from Bath County or Bland County, Wythe County, I mean, you might as well plan for a month travel just to get to your capital. There are occasionally pop up in America people who would like to move the capital of the United States away from what used to be the center of our country, right? Which is, of course, Washington, D.C. And they say, well, you know what? You know what's the center of our country? Topeka, Kansas. Like, this should be where the capital is located, right? That's what they claim. A more what location? Centralized. A more centralized location. So the idea is that by relocating the capitals from the coast to the center, whose voices are going to be heard more? The frontiersmen, the Western people. Yeah, and that's democratizing. Again, though, the conservative types, to be fair, conservative types don't really care that much for democracy. You understand? They would prefer only who vote? Well, elites, you know, or the folks that are getting something directly benefited from it. Or if not, then if people are going to vote, you're going to have to manipulate them. Give money or something, right? So democracy initially is not an idea that these folks are in big support of. Now they like republicanism. That means representative government, right? But they don't necessarily think who should have a voice in representation. Keep in mind, there are no public schools, y'all. None in the South. There are some in New England. Uneducated, poor, you know, a lot of times they're basically squatters. Like, these people shouldn't vote, right? Now today, the good news is, I guess you're considering it good news, they don't vote. You know, like 50% of Americans who are eligible to vote usually don't. I have said for years, if the poor really wanted to, you know, impact America, like, and have democratic socialism or redistribution of the wealth, then they should just vote. But they don't. Poor people don't vote. If poor people voted, then Bernie Sanders would be the nominee. You understand? I mean, it's reality. Reality is that, you know, who votes typically? Greater the education level, greater the income level, you know. But during this period, were they excited about the newness of it? See, we take for granted as common people that we can vote. They didn't. It was like a big deal. Breakthrough for it. All right. So that's what I mean by number 10. How did geography come to reflect these democratic charters? Make sense? Okay. So let's look at the pluses of our economy. Okay. And this goes along with the same issue of those cutting down trees aren't chopping off heads. Now, one of the things that's often not mentioned is they cut up the loyalist lands. Now, who were the loyalists? 80,000 people were loyalists. Who had they been? What kind of people predominantly?
British.
Well, they were definitely British. They're all British, but yeah, go ahead. Rich. Yeah, they had lots of land. So they left. They fled. 80,000 loyalists went to Canada. So when they left, what happened to their land? They redistributed. So thus, no need to chop people's heads off, right? All right. Another thing is you start to have, very small, but it starts, some domestic manufacturing. So what big thing starts to little begin in the 1770s in America? Very good. The Industrial Revolution starts a little bit. There it is. Not much. Okay, but it's going to take off in the early 1800s. Okay? But the minuses are going to outweigh the pluses. So you had no more guaranteed trade partner, plus what was Britain doing? What? No, we're after the war. This is after the war is over. So they were doing this thing I said was called dumping, which means could the British sell products in America cheaper than Americans could make them? Yeah, because if you've been making shoes for not century, but for 50 years, and a guy in Boston wants to make shoes, he's probably going to be able to start out like that. You know, it's kind of like having a mom and pops compete against Walmart. You know, tough competition, right? What else is happening? People had jacked up. Y'all know speculation and profiteering. You guys probably saw people hoarding hand sanitizer or toilet paper, and then they were going to sell it for a lot more. Yeah. That's called profiteering. And you're not supposed to do it. It's actually illegal.
It's actually also called price gouging.
Yeah, it's totally price gouging. Yeah. In other words, you know, when stuff is rare, people are like, oh, I got a bunch of this. I'm charging you an arm and a leg. So you're ripping people off as a theory. Now, you know, total free market would say do whatever you want, but you know, you're taking advantage of people. It is. That's how it is. You're not allowed to speculate to be a profiteer. You know, how does it work in America? Laws against profiteering usually are worded like, let's see, price fixing, subsidizing, and anything that engages in anti-competition. So, for example, if you knowingly bought up all of the toilet paper with the intent to sell it for more due to the demand for toilet paper, then that would be considered profiteering. Does that make sense? Because you're doing it with the intent of cornering the market. Like, I want all the market, and then I'm going to resell it, and I'm not a licensed transaction. The point is, you're not supposed to do that. Congress has a massive debt. Now, I will continue to talk about the problem of having massive debts. Of course, you know, but nonetheless, how are you going to pay for a debt when people don't want to pay taxes? Well, let me just read you something I wrote down before class started here. Under President Reagan, he increased national debt 1.8 trillion. Under his successor, George H.W. Bush, national debt went up 1.55 trillion, one term. Under President Clinton, it went up 1.4 trillion, 2 terms. Under George W., it went up 6.1 trillion, 2 terms. Under Obama, 8.3 trillion. And so far under President Trump, in one president term, 6.8 trillion up. So that's, in other words, we started out before Reagan took office with less than $1 trillion in national debt. So we have gained over $23 trillion in the last 4 presidents. Okay? So the way to get out of debt is not to continue going deeper into debt. And we don't, and by the way, during those same last 3 presidents, we cut $10 trillion out in taxes. 10 trillion. And I guarantee you it wasn't on ordinary people. So here's the thing, $10 trillion and the national debt is now 28 trillion. You can imagine if we had 10 trillion in revenue, would the debt be as bad? No, of course not. If we had 10 trillion coming in, you think it would still be as bad? Why, they spent more money than that?
Yes.
That's possible, but no. And I lived through the last 4 presidents, and none of them said, "Oh, well, we're going to go over budget." You understand? In other words, if they had more money, you think they would have spent it?
Yes.
Well, they spent the money and didn't have it. So that means they spent whose money? The future's money. They're cutting taxes. So they're not spending taxpayers' money; they're spending future taxpayers' money. You understand? And that's a difference. That means your money. And what do we know about people who get paid, who have to do taxes for bills they didn't make? They don't do it. They don't like it. They rebel. Well, we can't rebel against paying taxes without something happening, right? Yeah, exactly. So they can't raise taxes, right? Because who doesn't want to pay them? The people. Now, the good news is, I'm going to give y'all a heads up here. They come up with a way to pay off the national debt without taxes. We can't do it anymore. It's not possible. We had a great way to do it. Does anybody know what it is?
Print money.
No, if you print money, then what happens is inflation, and then that just what that does is charge interest rates to go up. And if interest rates go up, go ahead.
You cut benefits, right?
Well, the federal government in 1790 was giving no benefits at all to anybody. That is one way to lower a debt, but that's not a way to, really get rid of it. I mean, you can cut a good chunk out of it, and Thomas Jefferson will. All right. It doesn't get rid of a debt to spend less money.
It helps against the debt.
Yeah.
Take the money that you were spending
Okay. So you're saying you cut spending and then reallocate what you would have spent to paying down the debt. Okay, that's good, except there's no revenue increase. So you're not going to be able to max that, because our national annual budget is only $6 trillion, $3 trillion of which is deficit. All right, I'm going to take a minute to talk about this so you guys can understand, because I want y'all's generation to be the generation to fix this. And I don't know how we're going to do it politically. I really do. I want you guys to be the problem solvers. All right. So take a look at this when I bring it up. All right. And we're going to talk about how to fix this with the problems that we had. Okay. So if you're looking at this, $27 trillion in national debt, upper left. This is how much money the federal government spent this year over budget. Was that difference? You understand? So we spent over $3 trillion more. Okay? $3 trillion. So if we cut this $3 trillion, we still will not be able to cut this thing, because that's just cutting the growth of this. So not only do we have to cut $3 trillion out of it, that's growing, you're saying then we have to take this and cut that and apply the difference to this. But what the last four presidents have done is not cut this and cut taxes. So what the revenue, keep in mind, what's revenue, y'all? The amount of money that comes in, right? Here's the amount of money coming in, tax revenue, right? We were already at a deficit even before taxes were calculated. But once taxes are calculated, we're at that much deficit, okay? So, or if you just want to use a more modest one, that one, so $3 trillion national deficit, 1 year. 1 year. Well, that goes into what? The total national debt. Well, the Congress had a huge one of these. All right. Taxes were low. I mean, guys, we pay the lowest amount of taxes per capita in the world. I mean, obviously, America's the lowest tax country, modern country in the world, So, keep in mind, by the way, also state and localities are operating huge debts. That's $4 trillion more there. We live in states and localities too. But coming back over here to this. So, if you don't increase revenue, that's taxes, and you don't cut spending beyond to make up a difference, which that would mean spending like over $3.5 trillion being cut. Plus, how much are we paying each year in interest? That's $340 billion. That ain't going down. And if we print more money, what happens to interest rates? They're going to go up. They go up. Right? That's the deal to check inflation. Right? So the unpopular answer is to both increase revenue, that means raise taxes, and cut spending. So that means you pay more taxes for less benefits. That's the political reality. So that's why we have to fix this. All right? Because at some point in the future, we're already past 100% GDP. We're now at 137% GDP. Okay? But this is going to keep growing bigger and bigger. So everyone who's talking about programs that are going to cost stuff, from college education tuition or increased military spending or space exploration, all that comes out of a very small component of the budget. We got to fix this, but the way to fix it's not popular. Well, they didn't want to raise taxes in the American Revolutionary post period. So what's your other option? You guys would say cut spending, but dude, the federal government wasn't spending any money. Well, first of all, there wasn't a federal government. But secondly, they weren't spending any money. Put taxes on exports. I mean, the amount of exports don't vary the amount of money a country has unless you tax them. You're going to tax American exports? Yeah. So like charge money to somebody selling goods? That would be very unpopular. By the way, right now in America, the Constitution prohibits that. We don't tax exports at all. Yeah, but theoretically, were we trading that much to begin with? And so if you tax exports, what's it going to do to the price of the thing you're selling? Yeah, and then our foreigners going to buy it. So that doesn't work. I mean, I like ideas. I want to hear ideas. And cutting spending is an idea, but not only do we have to cut the deficit amount of spending, we have to cut into the amount that we would budget that's actually non-deficit to reduce the debt, right? So that means cut spending so much that people, I mean, particularly senior citizens, who votes the most? All people, you know, this is their Social Security, their Medicare, they're most reason. Guys, anybody know how they paid off this debt without raising taxes?
Tariffs.
That's a tax. And they did get some money from that. Problem with tariffs in the Continental Congress days, Confederation days, was they didn't have a means to enforce them. They had no tax collection agency. They couldn't make anybody pay taxes, but that didn't work. Tariffs is a tax. Okay, you're missing the giant answer that everybody's missing. Who owns all this? The U.S. The United States owns this. So what do they do with it? They give it. They sell it. They sell it. So the amount of money our country got in its first like 40 years of existence wasn't from taxes at all. It was from the sale of Western lands. Everybody hear that? We had so much land that we could sell it for cheap and the government could still make money, revenue. That's what I mean. We don't have any more of that. I mean, we got some wildlife reserve, but not enough to make real money off of, you know. So it was these lands, public lands owned by the government, that when they sold them to those settlers settling west, that money was used to finance the government. So we basically had like a tax-free society. They had a little bit of tariffs, but that's about it. Smart? That keeps us from having the French Revolution, right? Like you guys go settle in Kentucky or Indiana, wherever that is, right? Or Illinois, you know. So that's what began to happen was people would buy land under these laws. Of course, that's what they say about land. Chris just made the point, guys. We can't do any more because the reason why I always try to invest in land is they're not making any more of it. All right, you know, that's it. Plus, what's happening to sea levels around the world? They're rising. So you want to own land because one day your house out here might be oceanfront property. Not literally. You know, but you get the idea. It's like land is always where money is. Okay. So that's how they're going to get it. Well, you know, I think at this point in the history, we have to start deciding if we want to be the villain or not. No, I mean, seriously, like, you know, we've been a villain for a long time to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
You know, so you gotta start asking yourself, when it gets to that point where lots of people are going to be like, I don't want to pay this debt, you particularly, my kids, be like, well, what do we do? And I don't want to see that day come. I would rather it be fixed now. See, we have a problem in our society, in our history, for a lot of people, that when there's a major problem, there are a handful of people who see it, address it, say it's there, but we don't want to deal with it. You don't think we knew that a pandemic was coming? When I read about Italy having outbreaks, I've been to Italy last year. And I could look around and say, we're not doing anything to deal with it. We'd have testing, we'd have PPE. I knew it was going to hit us. Sure enough. So, you know, you have to be prepared for what's coming. The problem is most people, you guys know what I'm talking about there? Have I talked to you guys about Maslow's hierarchy? Okay, go ahead. The war itself. A war is the most expensive thing a country can do. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it is. You have to pay for all of the materials, the equipment, the trying to feed the troops. They borrowed it from France. So that was their huge debt. The French had loaned us, and the Spanish, and the Dutch. I forgot the Dutch were the first to loan us. So we had all these European banks that had loaned Americans money. John Adams went to the Netherlands to borrow money. And so here's the catch. I've heard kids say, well, we should have just been bankrupt. So the Netherlands, France, and other countries would never have loaned us money again if we had declared bankruptcy. Or if they had, the interest rate would have been so high, it would have been usury rates. This is why you as young people never really want to seriously consider bankruptcy, because from then on, you're not going to be able to borrow money. Okay? Or if you are, it's going to be on such tough interest conditions, it's not going to be in your best interest. But guys, I have tons of data I can show you. I'm going to stop sharing again here and show you something else. So, you know, we had 22,000 businesses declaring bankruptcy last year, right? 772,000 people, new bankruptcies. So, you know, we have tons and tons of people going broke in this country. You everybody hear that? And that's because we don't know how to manage money. Well, we're in a representative government. So who kind of reflects our own attitudes about money and debt? Our government, you know, so it's not a big shocker there, right? So we as a nation don't usually respond to alarm bells until it's crisis mode. You understand? That's just the way we operate. We think that, well, it's not going to affect us until, yeah. Well, what happens to a country, Gabe, when it defaults? What will happen? Nobody will invest in Greece anymore. Their money is now worthless. The people there are having a hard time making any shopping at all, you know, any kind of purchases. Now, the problem is, though, if America were to default, the global currency is pegged to the US dollar, which means if every currency in the world is pegged to a now worthless currency, what happens to the world? It's like hitting the reset button. And if you're hoarding gold, you might be in luck. Right? Yeah, all right. And, you know, that's why my bug out bag, it literally has gold in it. I don't want it to get to this point. I think that's crazy to talk like that. Right? But at the same time, you know, like we're on the verge, we're teetering, and nobody wants to be the people that fixes it, because that means you got to sacrifice. This is what virtue and beauty smell like. You understand? They smell like sacrifice. George Washington didn't take any pay to be the commander in chief of the United States, right? Nor he paid for his soldiers frequently out of his own pocket. So he sacrificed a lot. That's part of the condition for being this kind of leader. So I want to make sure you understand that the problem, as with the pandemic, there are no easy solutions. There are only bad and worse solutions. You think we wanted y'all with masks and social distancing and all that? But the alternative is even more people sick and dying. And that's not acceptable, you know? So that's kind of where we are right now. Okay. So let me resume and stop in about 5 minutes. Okay. Oh, you wanted to see the cost of the war. Of course. Yeah, we're totally paying for World War II. So national debt chart. Let me show you this, okay? Hopefully it goes far enough back. You guys, let me present this to you. Because war, and then secondly, government-run health programs are the most expensive things people can do. Well, it's 1940, all right? So what happened in 1940? No. What literally happened in 1940? December 7th, 1941, we declared war. World War II, right? So here was our national debt, World War II, okay? Korea will uptick. Throughout Vietnam War, our country was so prosperous. See, that's the hope, is prosperity will take us out of debt, right? Well, it's supposed to work that way if you use the prosperity period to pay down the debt. What happens is every time we get a prosperity period, we cut taxes even further. You understand? Which means the debt grows. It's the absolute opposite of what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to use that money to pay off the debt, not to add debt to it. So you see here, this is a prosperous period, but we spent a ton of money on the Cold War. Reagan restarted the arms race, spent the defense spending. Then Clinton, we call that the peace dividend, meaning once we bankrupted the Soviets, we had money. And so he actually, for 3 years, balanced the federal budget, cut defense spending and other spending, and some taxes went up. And so what happened to national debt? Started going down. All right, 9/11, $2 trillion in tax cuts plus the war on terror, right? Another $1 trillion in tax cuts, right? And no cut, and the pandemic. So the theory is that in war and pandemics, you should have money saved to pay for stuff. In Virginia, it's against the law to run a debt. The government of Virginia cannot run a debt. Okay? They have what's called a rainy day fund. So if there is a surplus, they store the money for future usage in case of a rainy day, an emergency. But we don't do that as a federal government. They don't store surpluses. I didn't see surpluses, right? But yeah, war. Oh, there's a war there. Anytime you see the uptick, that's almost always a war. Korea, all right? Now, Vietnam was unusual because President Johnson cut taxes, okay, as did President Kennedy, and increased social spending, and increased military spending. With the Vietnam War, the Great Society, but we were having so much prosperity. What have we done to our enemies in the 1940s? What did we do to Japan and Germany? We nuked them or bombed them into oblivion, right? What was Britain like after World War II? It was flattened. We had all of the world's industrialized nations were utterly obliterated except for who? Us. So this is the awesome period during the Cold War when we were the only guys in town, really. The Soviets were, the cars they were making for their people were so bad you wouldn't want to own one now. Like, they're terrible. The Soviets couldn't make anything except for maybe a rocket, right? But then Reagan cut taxes and increased spending. So when you cut taxes and increase spending, what's it going to do to the debt quicker? Grow it. All right. And that's what's happened time and time again. So, yeah, war is the most expensive thing a country can do. And honestly, we've been dealing with it ever since. Okay. Now, you guys, by the way, are still paying for the debt from World War II. I know, right? But the difference is, and I'll show you one more thing here and we'll call it a day. If you go to the debt clock and look, you can go back in time. All right. So look, it wasn't even what? Wasn't even a trillion. Now it's a huge number, 917 billion. And you'll notice that Americans have very little savings then. And our GDP was $2 trillion. See that? So if you think about today, our GDP is almost $20 trillion. So if the debt ratio was the same as when Reagan took office, if you look at this right here, it was 35%. 35%. Very, very manageable. In other words, can you have a debt and survive as a country? Absolutely. Most countries have debt. It's not like you should never have debt. It's not that point. It's how much of your debt. So, for example, if you look in here, do you see interest on the debt? It was $52 billion, which sounds huge, but no, that can't be right. Yeah, 52 bill. I know why it's so low today. You know why it's so low today at 340 bill? Why is the interest rate so low today for our amount that we're paying? That's right, because the interest rate, the prime, is so freaking low over the last decade. They've done what's called quantitative easing. So right now, it's 3%, 3.25%. That's very, very low. Very low. And if you have really, really good credit rating, you get it even lower than that sometimes. They're trying to give it to you. Like I have every month, it seems I get an offer for 18 months, no finance, no zero interest. free money here, have free money. So the problem is at some point interest rates are going to go up because the amount of money in circulation is outpacing. Keep in mind, Americans right now are not working very much. It means that the demand is going to exist, but we're not making enough stuff. Why have we not had more problem in this? Everybody. Why have we not had more problem from supply and demand? Yes, very good. Cheap imports. Because you can buy a 56-inch or 62-inch flat screen for like, what, $300? I couldn't buy a 19-inch vacuum tube for, TV for $300 when I was a kid. So this is the trade-off of globalization. You get cheap stuff, but you don't have any money. The good news is you have just a little enough money to buy cheap stuff. Does that make sense? You look befuddled by that.
I think I get it.
You don't understand why?
I think I get it.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, back to the PowerPoint, last notes. And you guys have been great today. I hope this is working for you at home and here. So this is what you're looking at. So you should have read up through. I'm trying to share it, guys, at home. I'm crashing my computer. You should be up through number 19 tonight. Creating a confederation. And we're done. Peace out, y'all.